Hello, welcome to McGowan Soundworks. My name is Phil McGowan. I'm a mixing and recording engineer based in Los Angeles, and today we are going to be looking at my mix of a cue called On the Run. It's from episode 7 of the Netflix series Black Rabbit, and the music is by Danny Bensi and Sonder Jurians. I'm excited to show you guys a session from these two wonderful composers. I haven't done a mix walkthrough of any of their music yet. And it is definitely a very unique way of working, given that they are some of the rare composers that write in Pro Tools, given that they do a lot of audio editing and recording as opposed to a lot of MIDI sequencing. That's the way that they work, and it works well for them and for their sound. So they just give me their Pro Tools sessions. So as a bit of a primer as to how this session got put together is that they gave me their Pro Tools session, which has all of their plugins. Some things are rendered ahead of time because I don't have all of the processing and plugins that they do, but I have a lot of it. And then they typically just have like a single reverb and a single stereo bus. So I need to take all of their tracks, import it into my mix template, reroute it into my surround routing and busing into my various different surround reverbs, and then, clean up edits and do all sorts of various things. So I'll talk a little bit about that as I go through the session as to things that came from them and things that I added on and things that I changed from their Pro Tools session to mine. This is also a little bit different from other score cues I've showed you because everything that they gave me is what they had in the mix of their demo. So I'm just doing a hopefully better mix and as mix in surround. This show was dubbed in Dolby Atmos, but I did the score mix in 7.1, which has worked out pretty well for mixing scores for Atmos because that fits nicely into the bed for Atmos. And most re-recording mixers are happy to get 7.1 stems for the score in an Atmos production. So I delivered this to Larry Benjamin, who is the wonderful re-recording mixer who did the dialogue and music re-recording mixing on this show. Larry's always been very complimentary to me about my mixes for this and Ozark and a few other shows we've worked on together. And this one went off quite well. I think we're all proud of how this all sounded in the end. And Larry told me he basically did almost nothing to my stems, apart from edits that were needed by, for showrunner requests of muting things here and there or slight adjustments. But pretty much everything played down the way that I mixed it, which is always a very exciting thing to hear as a score mixer. But anyhow, let's dive in and start looking at it. So, here's the session with all of my folders closed. You'll notice that there's only 8 stems in this template. This honestly, a lot of these cues sounded very big and were kind of very epic and very, distorted and thick, but there really often wasn't a whole lot going on as far as the number of tracks. They weren't very tall sessions in general, even the bigger cues. And this is one of the sort of bigger, louder cues. This is the third cue, including the main titles in the episode. And spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the show yet, this is a flashback to the very beginning of the first episode, as I recall, where Jake's restaurant is getting robbed. And in this scene, it flashes back 7 episodes later where Jake realizes that Vince is one of the robbers. So all sorts of crazy things are happening. Lots of epic slow motion and crazy gun battle, screaming, yelling, big reveals, all sorts of fun stuff. And lots of distortion for the music. So starting here with the Perc stem, the Perc A stem. Now Perc A and B I like to label as such instead of Perc low and high, even though typically Perc A is low and B is high for me, just because sometimes I don't have any Perc high or sometimes I don't have any Perc low, and I like to still split things out. And instead of sort of nomenclature-wise locking yourself into a certain type of stem, I like the little more broad labeling of just here's 2 Perc stems. I can do what I want with either of them. The reverbs are the same on both, so I can move things freely throughout them. But as you'll see here, there's some elements that aren't technically Perc on there, but kind of work musically all together. But let's take a look. So the first thing we have here is this tape dums. So instead of drums, they like to label things kind of funny sometimes. So it's tape dums. So here's the first track. Some like low sort of filtery sounding thumpy dooters. Let's go a little bit later where it opens up a bit. So that came on with a lot of processing already. I think it doesn't say it's been committed, but I think there already was a fair amount of processing committed to that. And with the working with their sessions into my session, inserts A through A are always not almost, but are always the plugins that they had originally. So I like to try to keep what they had on there with the caveat that if they have an EQ and they use Pro Q as much as I do, I will just edit their EQ instead of adding another EQ on here. But if there's no EQ, like you can see in these two tracks here, inserts F through J or anything that I have added. So I try to keep organized between what I'm doing and what was in the original session from them. Except I will be just using their Pro Qs because why not? It's already there. There's an EQ. You can add as many bands as you want in Pro Q, though honestly, usually like in this case, all I did was add this little low suppression here. So yeah, previously this had a bit more low end, but as you'll see in this cue, there's a lot of low end going on. So I'm cutting low end and low mids in quite a lot of sounds in this score in general. So I didn't do anything else. I just did a little bit of low management. I did pan this in a little bit. This is something I do a lot with surround mixing, where if I have low-end elements, I like to pan them in a little bit to get a little bit of a feed into the center channel. And my theory on that is that when it comes to theatrical surround mixing, apart from the LFE channel, which of course we have, I consider myself to be facing 3 subwoofers. Because in a theatrical environment, each of the screen channels, the LCR, ideally are full range, and they should be full range. And honestly, most of the low end that you're going to hear from music in film and TV shows is coming from the front channels. The LFE is really just there for extra subsonic rumble, shaking the seats kind of things. It always works in concert. Al Meyerson always says that a good rule of thumb is that you should be able to mute the LFE on your surround mix of a cue and not lose the low end completely. And I wholeheartedly agree with that, is that you shouldn't ever rely on the LFE as a clutch. As a crutch. The LFE is clutch though. So yes, I pan it in a little bit. So I'm getting a little bit of that low end, kind of making use of that center subwoofer that is in the screen channel. Of course, this is a home theater mix, because this was just on Netflix. This is never in theaters. So I still think it applies, but I'd maybe do a little bit less, because if someone even does have a center channel at home in a home theater environment, it's probably not full range. It's probably being bass managed anyway into the one subwoofer they have. But anyway, I also just like a little more focus with the imaging all around. Is something you'll see me do a lot with kick drums, with 808s, booms, bass drums, stuff like that. But just a little bit, just towed in just a little bit. I am only just adding a little bit of my typical Perc room, which is this 20th Century Fox scoring stage. I just think it's a nice convolution for Perc. It's not too long. This is also just a phenomenal room to record percussion in. If you record here in LA, it's all of the stages are great. Fox is one of the many great stages. Well, not many anymore, actually. There's only really 3 big stages anymore, Sony, Fox, and Warner Brothers, but they're all great rooms for Perc. And I only have a convolution of this one. There's no Sony or Fox or Warner Brothers convolution that I'm aware of that is available to the public. So yeah, I'm just adding a little space in 7.0. Can hear with and without. So very subtle. And on your end, listening to the fold down in stereo over YouTube, probably not hearing as much, but in here, just a little bit of surround space on sounds like this just kind of helps gel things together. And then I'm sending it to the sub, which for me, I never, ever send in general, once in a blue moon. But apart from that, really never just send something directly to the sub. Because essentially what you're doing then is bass management on the mix side of things, which I think is kind of a big no-no in my opinion, because theatrically there's probably not much bass management happening, except unless it's Atmos and they're bass managing all of the surrounds. Though usually they have their own subwoofers for that. But in a home theater environment at home, most people have one subwoofer that is both the LFE channel and is also bass management that is being processed locally at your home in your AV processor, because typically most people don't have any full range speakers in their system. If you buy a little Bose system or like a few $100 Sony surround system at Best Buy or something like that, they're all small speakers. They are not anywhere close to full range. So the processor at home is already bass managing those channels, the low end from those channels into the subwoofer. Now, if at the mix stage you're doing the same thing, you might just be doubling up bass management that always happens. So my philosophy with LFE is that it always should be something unique, which typically means using a subharmonic synth. In this case, I am using Pro Sub. This is, I think, possibly just the standard default. Let's see if I change it. No, it's a little bit different. So let me go rescue my settings from another channel. So I guess I did tweak it. I haven't touched this in a long time. I set this up years ago, and this is just the channel strip I've been using for my LFE for a very long time. So apologies if I don't remember exactly the thinking behind this. But yeah, it's basically a little bit of 30 and 45 hertz. You can choose the different sort of ranges here. A lot of this kind of reminds me is modeled after a hardware unit we used to use called the DBX 120A. Actually, some people probably still use it. I would if I had some. Maybe I will get some. That might be kind of fun. Though I don't know if they really sound that much better than the plugin, to be frank. But you can see I'm not using any direct signal. It's just 100% subharmonic synth going directly to the LFE, and with a little bit of distortion drive. Though honestly, this probably is not really doing much, but it might add a little color. Then it's getting a fair amount of compression from this Oxford compressor, just to sort of even it out. When the sub's there, I like it to just kind of sit there. And then I'm filtering it. So there's no reason to have anything above 110, 120, 125-ish in the sub. So this is just making sure that I'm not adding any extra, low mid-range, which is not usually what I want when I'm adding sub. I want low stuff. So that's all I'm doing on this one sound. Moving on, there is another track called Dums, but it's not tape Dums. And it sounds a bit more like a tom, which is fun. And this is their EQ again. This is their filtering. I'm almost positive. I probably rolled off this low end and did just a little low end, just suppression here. Yeah, that low end was just a little too hefty for me. So I rolled a little off, put a little room on it, and then I moved on with my life, which is what I like to do when I'm mixing. Next, there's these Perc As. Now, these are technically synths, but obviously I could see in the cue they were kind of working in concert with the low percussion as this sort of, boom boom thing that was going out through the whole cue. So I stemmed them together, even though that is not percussion per se. It is definitely Perc. That's what that is. I did nothing to this but a little EQ, it looks like. So, same thing. Little low mid suppression. Very subtle. Just making sure that the low mids don't get eaten up too much in the overall mix. Perc 2 is just a lower version of the same thing and came to me mono. Though actually, I think the only reason this is a mono is they had this wasted space on there that they just deactivated, but it still is a stereo track because of that. But anyhow, it's clearly a mono signal. So same thing here. I'm just doing almost the exact same EQ, just a little low mid suppression, because all the low mids in these cues just really built up a lot, and I'm just trying to keep things low and heavy and full, but not overwhelming in the low mids and the low end. You will notice here with the pan, I'm just panning it directly into the bus. I almost always start with my center percentages at 15. Now that just gives a little bit, you can see there's a tiny little hint of center channel, which actually you would think 15 is not a lot, but if I turn this off, and this is panned 15, almost dead center. That's no center channel. Just 15% of center channel actually brings in quite a bit of center. So it's still largely left and right, but it's just feeding it in the middle a little bit. So some of these low end elements get, some of that center subwoofer, which I like to make use of. So I don't typically like full LCR panning for music stuff. Usually the dub doesn't really want a lot of music in the center channel in general, unless it's like a solo vocal, a solo violin, solo woodwind, something like that. Generally, I like to kind of have more going on in the left and right to leave room in the center channel for dialogue and for certain sound effects that are usually deemed more important. Whether they are or not is up for debate, but that's another conversation. Anyhow, moving on to the channel strip here. Now, yes, I do use master faders because I use two Pro Tools rigs, as you can see here is my stem recorder. I have 128 channels of Digilink going into my Avid Matrix that sends audio back and forth. I'll explain at the end of the video why I still do it that way, but I've had two rigs for a long time. I maintain them. I like the workflow. But anyhow, instead of buses, I have outputs that are going to the other rig. And since I don't really touch this fader, I don't really care that it is pre-dynamics, because the only thing I use these faders for is for a safety fade out at the end of every cue, just in case there's some plugin making noise, which this cue does have. This cue does have a bunch of Valhalla delays that are making noise right now. So fading that out, if there's any, crazy 30-second reverbs that are still lightly decaying and I'm just not noticing them. I just like to have a safety fade at the end. It's not really a fade out like you would have done in the 80s and 90s on a rock song. It's just a safety fade. But anyhow, for me, the master faders are just a way to inject plugins before they output to my other rig. So people sometimes ask me like, "Oh, master faders," but the faders are pre-dynamics. Like, yeah, I don't really actually use the fader. It's really just a place to put inserts without having more buses than I need in my session. And I like my sessions as clean as possible, as you might have observed. Okay, so every bus has a Perc Q. This one's just a little extra, suppression there of the low end. It got a little woofy. Actually, let me bypass these first. Pultec. This is my typical channel strip that's on like pretty much all of my Perc stems on every project that I do. This is where it starts. I'll tweak it here and there, but this is my general starting place. Doing the Pultec trick, which is boosting and attenuating the same frequency, quote unquote, but it's not actually the same frequency. If you don't know the history, the original Pultec, the electronics were very imperfect, but they had a nice character. And even though these are technically a boost and attenuation at 60 cycles per second, they were not that perfect. So I think it was slightly like a few cycles below for the boost and a few cycles above for the attenuation. So if you turn both knobs, they don't actually cancel each other out. They just give you this nice little curve. Now, my curve is probably very big because I have the bandwidth set quite high, mostly for this high boost that I like to do. But it's just 1 dB of all of them. Sometimes I will grab this boost and really turn it up just to get like, if I have a big ensemble of like surdos and taikos and big epic cinematic percussion going on, that's a nice way to just brighten that up and get it to punch through the mix. But I just started there. So just a little extra presence at 8,000 hertz or 8 kilocycles per second in olden nomenclature. So yeah, you're not going to hear, let me get the whole ensemble going here. I don't know. With these sounds, you're not hearing it as much, but when it's on a full ensemble, it just adds a little niceness. It's just a little bit. Every plugin adds a tiny little bit, but it's very subtle on its own. Next is a parallel compressor distressor, which I have the mix here, almost, maybe, I don't know, 30%, 25%, because this is, my normal nuke mode, very heavy parallel compression that I like to do in percussion. Love that I can just inject this into the bus and just blend it here instead of actually setting up another bus and all that. So yeah, here's some epic parallel compression. It's a lot, intentionally, and a little distortion. And finally, I like the SSLG compressor as a Perc bus compressor. I use this on drum kit as well. It's my go-to drum bus compressor. There's a few others that I like as well. Sometimes I'll swap them out, but it's a classic. It always works pretty well. This one's getting hit pretty hard. Here's with that on. 4 to 6 dB, it's doing something. Now, granted, that's the left channel we're looking at. I do use multi-mono compressors on 5.1 and 7.1 buses. Yes, I know that they are technically 8 different compressors working independently. They are not linked, but generally most of my percussion sounds are working together in stereo, so I don't mind that the left and right are getting kind of pushed pretty hard and the other channels are kind of doing their own thing. Obviously all of the controls are the same. Now, if I really needed everything homogenized as far as compression goes, I'll use PSP Oral Comp as my newest addition to my compressor family that I've personally purchased that I love. That's probably my go-to, especially now they have a bunch of different models. I used them on a film recently in some creative ways, which is going to be a future video. But anyway, that's my Perc chain. That's the Perc A thing going on in this queue. So let's look at Perc B. Okay, so a couple things going on here. I do recall Perc-ons here is technically not Perc, but this was an open stem. It was kind of Perc-ish, so I put it there even though it's not Perc. But ideally, I just want to get elements split out so that the music editor and recording mixer have the control that they need on the dub. Now, the fun sound that we have here is this Cosmos sound. And you can maybe see that I did use a fun new to me plugin. At least it was to me when I mixed this a year ago. I think I did this episode in April of last year, so it's been a little bit. Which is Energy Panner, which First, I will show you what Danny and Sonder are doing on their plugins, but this was a lot of fun, and I used it a lot on this show. So first, let's just look at what they're doing because they did some fun things on this. Let's just listen to how it came to me. Actually, I like how it is in the intro here. Yeah, so some cool panny things going on. That's where I was like, this would sound fun, just kind of moving around the room, moving around. So I was like, this is a great use of energy panner. But first, this is EQ they're doing. I can't remember if I added this band or not. I probably did. This looks like something I would do, just sort of evening out the low mids a bit. I doubt I did this filter. Definitely not the high filter and the boost. That's probably the way it came to me from them. But they are adding some Sanzam, lovely, lovely distortion plugin, which we all know and love. And it's a Valhalla delay, which is also great. So without those, still cool. Some process tom or whatever. I have no idea what Cosmos is. That's just how it came to me. Add some crunch. That's cool. Add some delay. Even cooler. Love it. And then I got to have some fun. So if you look at the meters here, you can kind of see what it's doing. Now, Energy Panner, basically, once the sound goes past this threshold set there, it starts panning stuff around, and there's all sorts of presets that are fun. I don't know why when I recall a preset, it says no preset after I tweak it. It should still show me what it was, but I'm pretty sure this was a pinch of motion maybe, or perhaps, I don't want to lose my settings, but I think that's where I started with. I know I've used Boomerang a bunch. Orbiting's really cool. I used orbiting on a bunch of kind of really frantic, fast, 30-second note synths in this score, not in this cue. This is the only sound that this is used on in this cue. But if you listen to episode, I think 6 is where I got, or 5, I think episode 5 is when I bought this plugin. That episode beyond, lots of energy panner. Usually only one sound per cue I use it in, but a very overt sound. So I had a lot of fun with some crazy surround stuff that we don't always get to do on scores, because sometimes you don't want the score to be too overtly surroundy, as it were. But this one, everyone was down with it. Larry, I emailed Larry ahead of time, was like, hey, I'm doing some crazy stuff with Energy Panner. Let me know if it's too much. I can bypass it and reprint cues for you. But they all loved it. And when I went back to Playback at the wonderful stage at Universal, it sounded really cool on the stage too. So anyway, here's the sound with Energy Panner, which you won't really hear in stereo on your end on YouTube, but you can look at the meters. Yeah. I love how they just kind of it just happened to end right center. And I'm pretty sure every time I play this back, it plays back the same. I'm not sure how randomized it is, to be frank, but I just kind of let it do its thing, and it's fun. I remember watching this at home in my home theater system. I heard this stuff panning around, even just in 5.1 on my home theater system, and it was fun. So yeah, had some fun with that sound, added some room to it. Same Fox. You can probably hear it a little bit more on this sound. Yeah. There you have it. So next on this stem is this Perc A sound, which is technically a synth. That's just a straight up like ARP synth. The pan is where they had it. Sometimes I will tweak these and just like put it, just because I'm OCD with my panning. I like going in even fives, but whatever. It was fine at 27. I simply pulled my center percentage down, which of course is not a thing for them because they don't work in surround. But when I'm I don't like too much stuff in the center channel, so that's typically what I do. I added my own EQ because this is on inserts F through J, Foxtrot through Juliet. And yeah, it looks like I just rolled off a little low. Otherwise, I thought it sounded cool. And I added some room, which gave a little space. Very, very tight, short room, but it just kind of, gives a little space to things. Everything else is the same as far as the channel strip. I do not have the distressor turned on. I did forget on Perc A to talk about Stem Cell. This is a plugin that is on all of my surround stems on any project that I do. The screen channels aren't really doing anything. The LCR, you can see they're at 5 hertz. It's not really, it's just, I guess, a safety fade if there's anything unusual half hertz bullshit going on. It's catching that. But really, it's just to process the surrounds and the LFE. Now, even though this show I'm mixing 714 Dolby Atmos, of course Dolby Atmos, all of the channels are technically full range. I still don't like a lot of low end in the surrounds, especially when you're mixing for home theater Atmos, because you have to consider the few people that even have a surround system at home. Their surrounds are most certainly not full range. Their surrounds are definitely, not full range and being bass managed into a subwoofer. And it's just, if you have a lot of low end information going on in the surrounds, it just gets muddy. I don't ever usually feel the need to have that much sort of warmth all around you. I like to keep that up front, where we have subwoofers and full range speakers, at least in a theatrical environment. And then using, a little bit of sub as well, but mostly just the bass managed front speakers, because those typically are where most of the low end capabilities are going to be in any home theater system. Some home theater systems, of course, they're all like little satellite speakers all around, so it doesn't matter as much. But many home theater systems, including my own, have, more close to full range speakers at the front, and then the surrounds are always these little satellite speakers. Even in here, my PMC wafers here are full range. Are have decent low end, but they're by no means full range. They are bass managed through Dadman, through the SPQ card into my two subwoofers that I have in front of me here. But yes, so that's my, even for Atmos, if I have a 704, 714 stem, I'm doing the same thing to the height channels. It just sounds cleaner to me. And most of the stuff that I'm throwing up and around there is reverb or ambience or stuff that's not super low-endy anyway. And then LFE, same thing. This is parked at 5, or it looks like for some reason it got slid above 5 a little bit, but say la vie. It's at 10. Sorry, 10 hertz, because it's still below. It's just getting rid of anything that's super subsonic. And then the high is at 120, so it's just rolling off everything above that. Now, I recently saw some forum debate going on. Someone said that you shouldn't filter your LFE channel because everyone's home theater system is going to do that, or any B chain in a theater is going to do that, and that you're going to just cause low-end phase problems, which, yes, I know in theory that every time you add a filter, you're adding some kind of a phase shift at the filter point, but I've never heard that in my mixes. I've never bypassed filters and heard my low-end suddenly sound so much better. I really don't think, yes, sure, on a oscilloscope, I'm sure you see some kind of a phase shift, but it's not something I worry about. I'd rather not deliver an LFE channel that has things above 150, 175, 200 hertz, because there's just no reason to have it there. It's just better managed that way. I like to deliver the stem as it should be. So anyhow, that's what I use stem cell for. Oh, also, it does have a built-in limiter that you can see. I don't know why sometimes this recalls. Look, it was supposed to be 5 hertz. Why this recalls not all 0.5. I think it's just an old glitch from one of my old templates. Anyhow, I just put this at 0.5. This is a safety limiter. It's probably catching peaks here and there. Just so I'm not outputting clipped audio over to my stem recorder, where I'm also limiting before I print the stems, because there's more processing going on over there, which we'll get to. But anyhow, that is the Perc B stem. Moving on to Synth A. Now, Synth A, for me, I always have Synth A, B. Sometimes I have more. I just did a film where I had 4 synth stems at A, B, C, D. But typically, I usually have Synth A and B, and that's usually A for ARPs and B is pads. Or A is low synths and B is high synths if I have only ARPs or only pads. And that's really what's going on here. These Hawkins here are kind of lower. This pulse is a pulse, and then I put more. They're technically not sustained, but they're more sustain-y for this cue in B. But again, I have 2 synth stems. I can split them up however I want. There's some synths on this one. There's some synths on that one. I'm always trying to think of what might be useful musically for mostly the music editor, but also the re-recording mixer at the dub. So let's look at what here. We have these first set of Hawkins, which I think is some sort of external synth. I actually don't even know what that is. I really need to ask Danny Sonder what all these tracks are they're giving me. I just listen to them, and I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. Let's do this. Kind of a low bendy thing. They've got some devil lock on there. Here's without it. Devil lock and coffee go well together. Okay. So that's not doing a ton, but it's adding a little grit, little fuzz with the 4.5 crunch going on there. And that, of course, is from them because it's in inserts A through E. I'm then just EQing a little low mids and mids. Again, individually, it's not going to be a huge change, but all of my EQ moves add up to hopefully a little more clarity in the mix. And then I'm adding some of my Synth A medium. Now, recently I've been relabeling my sends this way. You can see all my sends are organized by stem because you must use the same reverb on the same stem for stemming purposes. Instead of labeling what they were, I used to call this like CR for cinematic rooms, SYM for symphony, AV for altiverb. So I just can swap out plugins and stuff like that and not commit to one plugin. I'm just doing long, medium room. UW is unwrapper. Because when I first started doing surround mixing 15 years ago, I was using a already then old plugin called TC Unwrap from TC Electronics. It used to be a processing unit that was inside of the TC 6000. That was sort of the main upmix plugin that existed before Pentio was kind of the first plugin that came out, really. Maybe not the first, but that was the first one we all like to use. And I still do use Pentio sometimes as well. It's a great plugin. But on my templates, I already said Unwrap. It's really upmix. But I keep UW because that's just, my thing. That's what I'm used to. Yeah, technically it's wrong, but I like it. And then a send for the sub. So that's how, you can see it's pretty similar on all of my stems here. Actually, I think they're all exactly the same, except for the Perc is room, chamber, and plate, and then a long verb, and then sub. But anyhow. Yes, so I am sending this mid. In this project, I used this Lustrous Plates plugin from Liquid Sonics. I love all of Liquid Sonics stuff. I have all of their, plugins, and they're all fantastic. Definitely, if you do any surround mixing whatsoever, Atmos mixing for music, get everything you can from Liquid Sonics. They're phenomenal. So, like I said at the beginning of the video, Danny and Saunders sessions usually just have one reverb and one stereo bus. Sometimes they might add a second reverb if they need like a room or something, but they're kind of just simple with, they just focus on writing the music, or sometimes they'll insert a long plugin onto a sound if they want something different than what the main sort of mix plugin they have is. For this project, they're mostly using a convolution and altiverb of a 240 plate, but it was only a stereo convolution, so I needed a surround version of that. So I spent a while sort of A-being back and forth, a sound going into both that and the altiverb with the 240 and lustrous plates. And this PM 240 medium 1 preset I made is as close as I could get it, but I didn't kill myself trying to make it exactly the same because they don't expect things to sound identical. I mean, I'm mixing it, so hopefully it sounds better. And this was also in surround, and that's sort of the main reverb that was on a fair amount of sounds on pretty much all Black Rabbit. There's a lot of lustrous plates on a lot of different elements. You can see here I also had it on my in my Perc reverbs here. I didn't use it on this cue on Perc, but anyhow, here's what the lustrous plates on the Haken sounds like. Yeah, cool sound. It sounds really fun in surround. It's nice to have that plate. You can really kind of notice it in the surrounds. And then you'll notice here these are routing to the unwrap. That's how I use my unwrap upmix plugin. Is I'll pick certain sounds and just send it straight to the unwrap. And it's basically just taking stereo sounds and spreading them around the surround field so that they're not just stereo. They're kind of all around you without adding reverb, which is nice. You get the sort of immersiveness of the sounds. And sometimes I also find if I send like a really wet sound that someone sent me with a lot of verb and delay or whatever, it somehow, it sounds to me like it somehow figures out how to like spread the reverb into the surrounds and keep the dry signal mostly up front. I've even had wet vocal stems sometimes. It sounds to me like the delay is kind of getting sent to the back, which is what I probably would do if I had all the effects separately anyway. I like having delay in the surrounds. That's kind of a fun effect to hear the vocal in the front and it decays behind you, stuff like that. Anyway, these plugins all do really cool things. Pentio and Halo are the two that I use. The key thing for these is to make sure that downmix exact is on, because I, as a score mixer, always have to be concerned with the downmix. Both the downmix that I generate for composers to review in stereo locally here at my studio, but then also I have to ensure that my stems are downmix compatible because these stems are going to be sent to the dub. They're going to be mixed in 7.1 and into the 7.1 print master, or in this case Atmos print master of the show, and then that is going to be folded down along with the dialogue and sound effects into smaller formats that the majority of people will listen to. I mean, let's be frank, Netflix, I think 90% plus of people are probably listening on like AirPods or something. It is what it is. But it needs to work. It needs to work in stereo. That's an issue we used to have with that old TC Unwrap plugin I was referring to before. Is it sounded really cool in surround, but sometimes it did some really phasey stuff on the surrounds that when it folded back in, it sounded not pleasantly chorused and flangy and weird and phasey. So yeah, the down mix exact is very important for if you do any up mixing. I use this always on string samples as well, or orchestral samples. Except for Perc. I don't love up mixers on Perc in general. With a lot of low end Perc, it softens the sound for me too much. So you notice my Perc stems don't have any up mixers. If I'm going to up mix anything like a high ticky sound or something to get some space or whatever, I'll just insert it directly on the track. In that case, I don't need it on as an actual full on stem bus. But yeah, that's what's going on there. Let's take a look at the next sound, which is more Hawkins. So, same thing. I think, yep, the same distortion settings, the same devil lock. It is what it is. I'm using a very similar EQ curve, but I just took out even more. This filter, I think, came from them. I think it was this Pro Q3. I just added it, or I just reproduced it onto my own EQ to take off a little buzz. It does get a little buzzy. Maybe at the end here it's a little buzzier. Not much, but it's just taking off a little high end, just darkening it a little bit. And then some verb. Yeah. Not too long. I've been using this plate on some other projects since I sort of dialed it in for this Black Rabbit show, and I've been liking it. Lustrous plates, great plugin. And finally, Pulse. This monotonous kind of filtered, distorted sounding thing. Looks like I just did a little bit of filtering, a little bit of low mid management, some plate. Oh, and by the way, all these sends, I think I'm pretty sure that Danny and Sonder were also sending these sounds to their plate. Any sends they have in their project, which is usually just rev, it's just one send. When I organize everything by stem, I just reroute their send to my reverbs and then adjust from there. I will add reverb on things that they didn't have on before, just subtly here and there. But it's nice that I can see like, oh, you added a shit ton of reverb in the sound. I'll do the same, just using my nicer surround reverbs in my mix. So just FYI, some of the mixing choices there are kind of, they're not made for me, but I can see what they did and I can just reroute them instead of having a printed sound that I'm then trying to upmix into surround. I do like that I have the dry signal separate and I can redo the reverb in surround. And I kind of have a sense of what they like. So it usually works out pretty well. I'm also sending this sound to Synth A Room, which has a little bit of a story behind it. So I use Altiverb. Most of my rooms you can see are Altiverb. I like the convolutions. I do EQ them, so a fair amount actually. Some of the rooms just get really built up, and this one low mids. I mean, I'm -7 at 190, rolling off a little low end, just a tiny bit of brightness. I mean, 1 dB, barely anything. But in general, I like the selection. It is nice that a fair amount, but sadly not all, of the convolutions available in Altiverb are now go up to 906, I think. I mean, 906 for me, because I would never use reverb in a LFE in general, unless it's like a sound designy thing. But anyway, Westlake D is the one I like to use for synths. Sadly, it only goes up to quad, even though I do see there are other convolutions here. There's other mic positions, so if anyone for Audio Ease is listening, you should be able to make me at least a 7.0 version, because sometimes I will literally just take this bus and send it to another stereo Altiverb with a different IR and put it in the rear surround, so I can kind of make it on my own. I really wish they would just for the plugin, maybe future update. You can give me Westlake Studio D in 7.0 or above. 7.04 would be phenomenal. This room, it still exists too, so maybe a new convolution just needs to be recorded. But the reason why I use this room is I read a book towards the end of college by Bruce Swedien called, I think, In the Studio with Michael Jackson. It was about his journey recording Thriller, which is still, that album sounds like it was produced today, even though it was done in 82, I believe. Arguably, in my opinion, still the best sounding pop album from an engineering perspective. Well, in a lot of perspectives. But that was all pretty much done at Westlake D, probably a couple of the studios too, but predominantly at Westlake Studio D. And in that book, I remember Bruce talking about he would take all of the synths and pipe them out of the studio loudspeakers in Westlake Studio D and record the room back so that the synths all had a little space on them, because he didn't like how just dead and unnatural to a degree that the direct sounding, the DI'd synth sounded like. So I read that, and then when I saw that Westlake D was available, I'm like, oh, Bruce Swedien used Westlake D on synths. I'll do the same because Thriller sounds great. So that's been my synth room. And if I just play this and turn it up, hear how tight that is? It's very short. So it really doesn't translate as reverb. It really just translates as a little space being spread around in surround. And just gives a little life to things because it is very short. I mean, I think it translates even shorter than 0.7 seconds. I am using a spanner here to upmix it to 7.0. So I'm just taking the surrounds and putting them in both sets of surrounds. It's still a 5.0 sound because there's a little center bleed from the quad going on. But anyway, that's what's on there. Here's that all together. No effects. Yeah, it's got some vibe. Moving on to Synth B. Now, these are not actually pads, even though a lot of them are quite rhythmic. Some of them are a little more paddy. But they all kind of, to me, were one unit of musical material. So I put them all together on Synth B. They're these Lyras and then another pulsar sound. Same synth, I assume, as this. I think all of these are just some outboard, like, modular synths or something that they use. I don't really know. Lyra, I think, is like a little, like, like desktop synth. Anyhow, let's go over what these sound like. It's a little pulsy. That one's more of a sustain, though it's got a tremolo on there, so it's still got some pulse. Pulse is a pulse, kind of a kick. Honestly, if I didn't have all these boom booms happening here, this is a sound I often would just put on Perc A because it basically is a kick drum. But they all have movement. They all have, either a tremolo or a sort of arp sound. So in concert, they were just kind of a persistent sort of sound. And indeed, look, they do have Tremolator, another great Sound Toys plugin. I suggest all Sound Toys plugins. They are phenomenal. Big shout out to Sound Toys. These might be, they're not quite the same. They're tweaked a little bit. But these are plugins that came from Danny and Sonder. They had already dialed these in. They have tuners on here. I assume this is why I think I'm pretty sure the Lyra is some sort of a modular synth because they have a tuner plugin on there. So they probably had to tune it every time because they can be unwieldy. And they left them there, and I guess I could have bypassed these or deactivated these, but they don't change the signal at all. They're just a meter. They're there. I mean, they take like no CPU, so I just left them. The only thing they did EQ-wise, looks like on the Pulsar, they had this mostly these filters going on. This boost, it was probably them, and I guarantee you this 2 dB cut at 50 hertz was me, just to sort of, again, try to tame the low end of everything so that it all can work together. On my end, on the Lyras, not Lyres. Lyres is an actual plucky acoustic thing. Just doing some low-end management and filtering. Oops. Low-end management and filtering. Just filtering. So here's with my EQs on. No EQs, including theirs. So, not drastically different, but just clearing things up a little bit. On a couple of these sounds, I'm using the room. This is also the same Westlake Studio D because all my synth stems, have the same effects, so I can move sounds between them. So let's add a little room on some things. There's it overt for you. There's it reasonable. And then this pulsar, I'm adding some LFE, which make it more overt. Honestly, I probably got to turn this up. That sounds kind of fun. And maybe if you have full range speakers at home or headphones, you can probably hear that. But that's where it's at. Just a little tickle in the subs. And that's what made up Synth B. Moving on to the miscellaneous stems. Now, here's where we have a lot of fun going on. With woodwinds. This score had a lot of really fun processed distorted woodwinds. As a kind of former need to get back into it saxophone player, I really did enjoy hearing these elements. So here's saxes low. Now, this does have processing that I don't have. It's .cm. They committed something on it. Obviously, this is processed because this is not what a saxophone sounds like naturally. Sounds like an ensemble of saxophones, honestly. Very hard cut. And then there's a lower one here, which I think is literally the same thing, an octave down. Chaos. Love it. Once again, didn't do anything crazy on the low one. A little low on management. Low end and a little mid-range cut. Not a ton going on here. Just softening, reining in. A lot of these cues came to me with just a lot of low mid, low end build up. So I was just going through sounds like, oh, that's a little much, that's a little much, that's a little much. And this had the plate on it as well, which really gave it some nice life. Again, it's not like it has nice size to it, but it's not long. It's not that long. Even though this lustrous plates, it looks like it should be. It's like the damper is set to 3 out of max is 6 or whatever. But it doesn't translate that long. It doesn't decay that long. So it settled well in the mix. I have been using this quite a bit. I think this is the only one I made, right? Yeah. I should probably explore more of the presets in here because Liquid Sonics is awesome. Moving on, there's also a bass clarinet. Let's look at one of the fatter sausages here. Distorted though. So yes, this is the raw. Sounds like a bass clarinet. Sounds like an expected bass clarinet. Little R bass they use. They love to use this on a lot of sounds just to add a little warmth to things. It does work quite well. So there's a little too much though, which you'll see in my EQ curve. I corrected that a little bit. Sometimes I will take these and slide them down a bit. They put these on Perc sometimes on like booms. They have these bombo sounds that Danny and Tony use a lot, and I like to. They put it at 80. I like to put it like 40, 45, so it gives me some more, low end girth. But anyhow, there's that. The little Pro Q before distortion, which is interesting. So this shelf was them, and then the low end stuff was me, if I recall correctly. So this is not doing a ton again, but so yeah, that's what the R bass I'm pretty sure is generating, like all of that. Not all of it, but a lot of it. So I just thought it was a little too much. So instead of adjusting the R bass, just EQ it, sounded better, moved on with my life. Finally, there's some Devil Lock on there with quite a bit of crunch. I mean, this crunch knob, if you are familiar with Devil Lock, quickly gets pleasantly unruly, as it's supposed to be. So, here's what that sounds like. Oh, yeah. Now it's a cool bass clarinet. Look out, what was his name? Benny Maupin, I think, was the Headhunters bass clarinet player. Bass clarinet can be cool. Anyway, here's some plate on it. Quite a bit of plate, actually. -10, actually. Not insane. A note on that. This is where I usually start all of my sends. My reverb sends always start at -10. Pleasantly, here in Pro Tools, I can go to the mixing tab, and I've already set my send default to -10, which didn't used to exist. I am pretty sure, if my memory serves me right, I think I made this feature request, and they finally actually did it. I think I made this feature request like 12 years ago, and then like 5-6 years ago they put it in there. So shout out to Avid. They do, if you ask, they sometimes eventually do put things in. Because before it was either you had an option of negative infinity or unity, all or nothing. Most of the time was not useful for me. So I was like, hey, it'd be great if I could just have the sends default to -10. That's where I like to start my sends. That's a technique I stole from Sean Murphy. The couple of times I worked with him, I noticed all of his sends started at -10. Seems like a good sort of medium amount of reverb. If it's too much, you go down. If you want more, you go up. You got headroom. So take a look at your preferences. There's a lot of fun things you can do in there that are useful. The pan is from them. It's going into a bus. Oh, you'll see that the other two saxes were going into the unwrapper, the up mixer rather. I'm pretty sure these are the exact same. My 7.1 default here. Yeah, it's the same setting on all the stems. Sometimes I will tweak these. You can slide these knobs to move things forward or back some. You can kind of see how that works. It really spreads it around, or it can keep it focused in the front here. So I like it. Medium. So it's just, taking a little bit and filling it in the back a little bit, which is nice. And of course, what you heard just now was the ensemble of sax, bass, clarinet. Stress. The sounds of stress and scary, stressful things happening. Okay, moving on. Miscellaneous B. More woodwinds and saxophones, which is great. Starting with Sax of Doom, which, if I recall, yes, had no processing. I mean, it obviously had processing at some point, as you'll hear. I also am pretty sure this is just a render of these elements I have here. You can see I do have some saxes on their individual tracks here panned out going into a bus. It sounds like the same source material, but this one they had rendered and used. Anyhow. So I think they just edited them around, panned them around, some really crazy stuff, or maybe it was a plugin. I don't know. It came to me this way. It sounds cool. Now, this could have been a cool option for me to use Energy Panner again, but I think with everything going on, and then I just sort of focused on overt Energy Panner on this Cosmos sound, and probably because it came back. Oh, actually, they didn't overlap, like, really at all. I guess I probably could have put Energy Pan on there. It could have been fun, but I didn't. Missed opportunity, I guess, for some more surround fun. Oh, well. I just did a little EQ on it. Like, barely EQ. Just a little mid-range suppression there, so it didn't eat up the mids too much. And, of course, some plate, which, again, they probably had on their mix that I just replicated. Yeah, cool stuff. Next, I have these saxes, which, again, I think is the same thing. With some fun processing, so they've devil locked and Valhalla delayed it. Here's raw. So pretty dark. I don't know. Maybe those were time stretched or something. They sound already kind of warbly. No idea. I think this might be Sonder playing saxophone. I don't really know where he got these. I think he just blasted some saxes and distorted them, which turned into a fun sound. So here's some devil lock, which really gives it life. Oh, yeah. That's fun. How much is on here? Oh, 7 on crunch. That's a lot. That is very crunchy. Captain Crunch of distortion here. Anyhow, and then some delay. They love Valhalla delay. Danny Sonder uses this plugin a lot. Everything Valhalla is fantastic. You can see the age has been jacked up here because they like things that are aged and dirty and lived in sounding, warped, warbled. That is very much in the Danny and Sonder wheelhouse. I will note though that this plugin does have a lot of noise. So if we look at the Pro Q here, if I turn this on, this is all I did EQ wise. Just again, a little low mid management, a little mid range management. That's all the noise from the delay. Now that is at negative 110 decibels. dB full scale. So it's not really a problem. I can't hear that in here right now with my air conditioner on and stuff like that. It's imperceptible. But there have been cues on different projects in the past where they have a lot of Valhalla delays all on at the same time. And it has been an issue. Just too much. Just I open up a session and it sounds like a bad tape machine. So love this plugin. I don't know why it's so noisy. Apparently it has to be that way in the design of the delay. It is what it is. Sometimes I will automate the volume of these, after the delay so that at the end of the cue or the beginning of the cue, you don't just hear raw noise with no delay going on. But anyhow, Great plugin, but just a note on that. Okay, and add some room. Let's turn the delay off so you can hear what the room's doing. So, a much more overt room than Westlake. This is Clinton. This is my other kind of go-to short room that I've recently been using in Altiverb. This does, I believe, go up to all the way up to scoring stage. No, it's studio, right? Is it in the studio? Oop. Yeah, Clinton recording here. Less than 7.0 DTS. Okay, I think it is up to 7.0. So this one is 7.0. It isn't fully up into the full-on. Let me rescue this from this stem. It isn't a full Atmos convolution, but yes, there's just no center channel. But I'm using the center bleed, which is a nice little feature in Altiverb. Just a little center channel vibe going on. -8, just a tiny bit. But yeah, this is great. Mid plus sized room. Just gives some space that you can actually notice, as opposed to Westlake's very subtle, like very tight room. Clinton's a little bit bigger. I do use this on drum kits a lot. It's my go-to initial if I get a very dry drum kit. I mix a lot of drum kits for other projects that drummers record at home, and a lot of them don't have very large rooms to record their drums in, so I get very dry sounding drums. And sometimes I want a nice big splashy room to sound like I recorded at NRG or at Chaplin Studio A or something like that. So this gives me kind of that sound. You can compress it and afterwards, or sometimes I'll use this on Perc instead of, if the Fox is too big of a sound, this is a great one too. Love this preset or this convolution. In Altiverb, I have EQ'd it again. I mean, my EQs are almost all, they're 200-ish something. Take off some low end. Honestly, sometimes you just do this because I just want to filter out. I don't want much, but that does too much. I really wish they actually, I don't know why Altiverb doesn't have a filter. I suppose I could just put a filter plug in after it. Which sometimes I do. But anyway, that's, let me actually just go to my preset here. You see I've saved a bunch of things in Altiverb that I like. But yeah, that's the room that's on there. Moving on to the final chunk here. These are live mixes that were done by Harry, the staff engineer at Bandrika Studios up in the Valley. They did a session that sadly I couldn't engineer. I was too busy mixing. Of a variety of woodwinds. There were saxophones, there were baritone saxophones. I think they might have had a tubax, which is a contrabass saxophone. They had some bass clarinets. They had bassoon. It was just sort of a mishmash of not random, but just a bunch of woodwind instruments, and they did all sorts of fun, crazy effects. So Danny and Sonder just used Harry's live mix most of the time, so they could process it easily. They just had a stereo. They like to throw plugins on there. It's easy for them. And then, as you can see here, all of these sounds I'm putting into the same Unwrap Upmix plugin. It's the same Halo settings from before. Yeah, and I mean, this one has Saturn. This one has nothing. This one's just an EQ. As you can see here, at one point, this sound had a Saturn on it, but they turned it off. Occasionally, I did get all the microphones that Harry multi-tracked, and I did my own mix, and I could actually pan some room mics around and stuff. But this worked fine for this very highly processed sound. And it was some really cool effects. So let's hear this. Let's hear it first without the Saturn. Yeah, sounds like some flutter tonguing or some growling or something, or just some cool woodwind effects. And then they made it even cooler with Saturn. Oh yeah. Another favorite of mine. I love all of the FabFilter plugins are fabulous, including Saturn. Obviously, I use a lot of Pro Q. I like Pro L2. Pro MB I use a lot. Pro DS, all great. Definitely get some FabFilter if you're looking to buy more plugins, which is a thing. Anyway, little EQ, just a little low mid reduction, a little mid range reduction, and then some verb. Fair amount of verb. -6 is a decent amount for a send return. Yeah, and the same plate. Oop. This is the same lustrous plates that I made. All the stems had the same plate sound. Sometimes I tweak it a little bit, but in general, if I was going to use the plate, it was the same one. because that's what they were doing. They only used one reverb in their session. I use different reverbs because that gives me a little more space and dimension, but it's good for me to just have something like their verb so I can, kind of be in their initial sonic world. Here's another layer. Sounds like all saxophones to me. I did a little EQ to it. Just filter. This is typical. You can see how much low-end garbage is going on. That's just the room. Every room has that. You record strings, brass, percussion, woodwinds, choir, any large ensemble with ambience mics put up high, to get the room sound or the ensemble sound. You're going to pick up a lot of HVAC noise, AC noise. So we're always filtering that stuff out because there's no reason to leave that garbage in there. My default, if I just insert a Pro Q4 here, it starts with a 20 hertz filter that I can just insert the EQ and just chop off whatever low end garbage is going on. And I love that you can just, dial in whatever you want, as many as you want. I think you can have up to like 24 bands, which I've never gone anywhere close to. I've usually got more than 2 or 3 bands at most, or 2 filters and 2 bands, maybe. A high pass and a low pass or something. Love Pro Q. Anyway, that's sort of my philosophy there. I'm also, when I'm mixing scores that are pretty much all from the box, both synths and sample libraries all often have tons of unneeded low-end garbage. Surprisingly, I'm surprised the sample libraries actually don't filter out more of that on their end, because sometimes I'll get a stereo track of like a high harmonic, and there's all this low end. I'm like, why didn't you guys filter that out when you mixed your string samples? But again, c'est la vie. That's life. So yeah, I just filtered this and added reverb. Or again, they probably added reverb and I just did the same thing. Just different reverb. Slightly. Hopefully better. So there's that, and here's one more layer that has been processed. Hard for me to tell if that's actually sounds like trombones, but it actually might just be like alto saxophones or tenors that with the plugin is making it sound punchier. I can't remember if they had brass or not on these sessions. I wasn't a part of the sessions. But it says grains. I feel like is the grains, is that the like GRM tools? I actually can't remember what exactly that, or is grains a plugin? Anyway, it's been processed. This EQ came from them. I actually think this is literally just what they did. You won't see me boosting 1K like this very often, so I doubt that I did that. And the filter is probably just as they had it. So this is probably just their EQ. And then we just added some plate. And then all together, cacophony of woodwinds and maybe some brass. Yeah, and then this thing just sort of tails out, and they have a long fade there. Now, all this volume automation here, this came from them. This is all automation, they had in their session. I will tweak this sometimes or clean it up. Like oftentimes, something like this, I might go in and just, snip that because there's no reason to have it there. But this one I did not. And then if I'm going to change the level, I'll just drag the whole thing up and down like that. But it is nice that I have their automation. Sometimes their gain structure is a little funky from a mixer's standpoint too. So I'm able to, pull down the tracks. And sometimes they'll have a track at plus 12 going into a bus at negative 20. I might just kind of do this and, just kind of jimmy the gain structure a little bit. But yeah, it's nice that I have their automation. I can see it. I can tweak it if I need to, and be aware of kind of what they're doing. So yeah, that's everything in this queue. Before I play back the full mix and then A/B it against the reference mix, as I said before, all these stems are just outputs. If you look at my I/O here, all my stems are just going out 7-1 outputs to my Matrix Digilink outputs. I have 128 channels of them. This project, I'm only using half of them. I do have a couple utility sends here for Dialogue Slug is literally just the dialogue track so that there's a sync track basically, so music editors can easily just visually put the dialogue slug of the cue I did against a new picture track. If there's a conform, it can be an easy way just to see, where the sausages moved around, where the waveforms moved around, and quickly conform. Click is not really much of a thing in Danny Sana's world. Sometimes they'll have a pulse up to record to, but they don't really often have like reliable grids, so I don't even print a click for there, because sometimes there is no click. This cue actually, there is a grid with a tempo. I don't even know if it makes sense. I guess it kind of does. This one maybe does. Yeah, this one has an actual grid, but they like to free time it a lot. So I'm like, why even print the click if half the time it might not even be useful to a music editor, who honestly is pretty much the only person that's going to use a click from a score mixer. But anyway, so all those outputs are getting processed through those master faders. They're going into my Avid Matrix here. So they're coming in here from my from this rig, and they're just outputting directly over to the second Pro Tools rig. Then the second Pro Tools rig is doing the same thing, just sending everything back. They're just cross-patched. I will do some different patching because I have a Mac Mini running the Atmos renderer software. So I have 128 channels of Dante between that rig. So my patching does get more complicated than this for if I'm doing Atmos mixing. But that's some fun, nerdy stuff for another video. But anyhow, I don't know why this is... I think I was playing with my volume knob, and usually they're a little bit more fixed there. Anyhow, looking over screen sharing here to my print rig. Sorry, the cursor for some reason hasn't been showing up through screen sharing. But here's the stems for this cue. This is what I printed. You can zoom in and see what was there. I record a full composite 7-1 mix, and then also a full stereo fold down. And then here's that dialogue slug. You can just see literally it's just the dialogue. It's never intended to be listened to. It's just literally for helps conforming. I know a lot of music editors don't even use it. I've just always printed one because I used to have to do conforms when I used to work for a composer, so it was useful for me. Anyhow, it's what I do. So all those inputs are the inputs here are matched from the outputs of the other rig. I don't know why that dialogue slug is there. So here's the 871 stems coming in. They input to these buses down here that get just a little bit of tape saturation. I'm always using the Studer. Sometimes I'll switch this over to this 900 actually maybe would have been a cool option for Black Rabbit because it's darker. It's got kind of a cool vibe. 456 is a great option for rock stuff. 250 I've used before too, also kind of a weird side one. But GP9 is like, that was the hi-fi tape. That was like the standard nice, good sounding tape. And the saturation that I like on my stems, I just want a little bit. Just it adds a little sheen in a nice, pleasant way to the high end. It does a little bit to the low end. It probably adds a little bit more low end than I would like, which is why I'm cutting so much low end here and there. Though I have pulled back on the sync EQ here, this low frequency tweak. I think it default was a little bit more, and I think I pulled that back when I made this preset here. It doesn't even show my preset, but I do have a PM GP9 30 IPS plus 9, which is the exact same thing. Cal to plus 9. I actually don't. I need to research my tape cal. It's been 20 years since I've touched a tape machine, but I think that gave me more headroom, right? Sorry to the analog buffs out there. I like how it sounds. Left it at 30 EPS because I didn't want it to be taking off any high end. If you roll this back to 15, it is a pretty significant. Actually, I could probably just even listen. Nope, not that. No. This stuff's already pretty dark. You're not going to notice much of a difference there. But I did have to tame the input on this. I noticed when I first started using this plugin that it was getting a little overloaded. When there's a lot of mid-range material, it was distorting. I didn't want that. So I just tamed the input and just compensated with the output so that I get the tape saturation, maybe a subtle tape distortion, but I don't like when I have a loud cue, it's not like just pure crunch. If I want pure crunch, I'll do that intentionally. On every stem then it's going just to a limiter, -1, -1. It's literally just making sure that nothing's printed above -1 true peak, and just catching peaks really. So then the output of these buses all go over to the inputs of the record tracks. The output of the record tracks go to another set of buses here, both with a limiter on there. The stereo limiter I usually have a little gain on. I'm not sure why I didn't. Usually I have this at 1.5, just add a little bit of gain. after the fold down. But that's a good note to make is that when you're doing score mixing, it's all about the stems. Everything you do has to apply to the stems. If you're a score mixer or getting into score mixing, do not put anything but a limiter, a safety limiter, not a heavy limiter, on your full mix, on your 7-1 mix, your 5-1 mix, your stereo mix, whatever it is. Whatever your full mix is, it will not get used at the dub. Sometimes it does. I will make a caveat that Larry told me on Ozark. Sometimes he was using my 5-1 full mixes. Very nice of Larry to do that. But 99,999 out of 10,000 times plus, they always use the stems because they're going to need to tweak stuff. They need to have them available there for if the director, what's that sound? Turn that off, turn that up, turn that down, move this around. It's all going to be the stems. A music editor is going to conform stems. They're not going to use your full mix. The full mix is really just for like archive and reference. So just put a limiter on it. Don't process it, because if you do a bunch of EQ or saturation or whatever, they're going to put your stems up at the dub, and all of that stuff you did that you were listening to while you're mixing will not apply to so it's going to sound different. The whole idea is that the summation of your stem should sound exactly the same as the mix that you are listening to and monitoring while you mix. So very important note there for any young or aspiring score mixers out there. Do not put any processing on your full mix. Just don't do it, because the stems is what is going to need to be used. Do that processing on the stems or before the stems. So yeah, I use the same bus for both my 7-1 mix. If it was 5-1, it'd be a 5-1. Atmos is a little bit different. Again, another video. I use the Nugent Halo down mix. I don't know. I A/B'd it against the built-in Pro Tools one. I could be just crazy. I thought it sounded a little better. I like it. It looks nicer. It's a down mix plugin. I don't have that strong a feeling about it. But I do turn everything down by -3, just so that the summation, like you'll see here, like that's even pulled back, and it's already pretty hefty. It's already getting up to -3. I don't want to overload the down mix. So I pulled everything down by -3, and then my formula is like, the left and right is at -3 or unity, the regular level. The center channel I pull down by -3. The surrounds I pull down by -6. And then the LFE I just leave full bore. I know a lot of people don't do that. Some people do -10. Some people turn it off. The stereo fold down in your home theater receiver, or your Blu-ray player, or anything like that will dump the LFE. That is the Dolby standard. Mostly because they don't want to have to build in a limiter chip into these devices, because they'd be more expensive. So again, another good reason to not rely on your LFE. It's often dumped. In my mixes, I like having it there. It's adding some harmonics. I like it in my mixes, but so the stereo mixes that I print here have it in there. And then those go back to here and input into these tracks. And then this outputs, you'll notice I have a monitor return here. So 7-1 mix return comes out here, and then is and then is just a return channel in Pro Tools here. So my mix is monitoring here and then going out my monitors. So everything goes back over there, gets summed together, gets some processing, bounces back here, and I listen to it here. And that's also how I feed my meters. I have a little USB monitor here with those meters inside. But anyway, all that being said, let's hear the damn thing. So yeah, there you have it. An epic, crunchy, stressful, intentionally Black Rabbit cue. You might have noticed the hawk-eyed viewers that yes, my meter here, which is my my 7.1 output, was showing clipping, but that's just because when I switch back and forth from the ref to the full mix, it temporarily overloads. The mix is not clipping. So if anyone's like, "Oh, Black Rabbit, he just distorted and clipped all the mixes," no, that's not what's going on. I do use limiters wisely. Anyhow, it was fun to show you this. I had it's been way too long since I haven't showed a Danny and Sonder cue yet. Obviously, compared to some other of my videos, the difference between the ref and my mix is going to be a little more subtle because it's the exact same elements. I'm not, mixing in live orchestra, which is going to be usually a drastic sonic difference between samples. Even with the best programming, live orchestra is always better. When it's a good live orchestra. Anyhow. But I mean, I'm just adding a little extra sheen where necessary, but not too much sheen because this stuff still has to be crunchy and dark, and just sort of evening things out. Of course, they work in stereo. I'm mixing it up into surround, but yeah, it's kind of the final polish on things, and just trying to get it to still maintain the character that the composer gave, in this case, Danny and Sonder, but just kind of clear up the mid-range and the low mids and stuff like that, so that it works a little better with dialogue and sound effects. And then it's in surround too, so that they're not having to add reverb or do up mixing at the dub, which they usually don't have time to do very gracefully. They just sort of shove it all. Not always, different re-recording mixers have different levels of how well they do that. But if there's a music mixer in the chain, we might as well mix in surround because we're gonna have the time to take a little more care to do a nice surround mix on the score. But anyhow, hope you enjoyed. Please watch the show. I will make a shameless plug. If you're a Emmy Sound Branch voting member, please consider voting for us. We're nominated for sound mixing in a limited anthology category this year. Yeah, either way, really loved working on the show. It was a really fun one. I've done a lot of projects with Danny and Sonder, and yeah, we always have fun and do some cool things. So anyhow, take care and enjoy your day.